Syria's interim prime minister is calling on the millions who fled the country's brutal civil war to return home. Some here in Europe fear they may be forced out as European capitals rethink their asylum policies for Syrian refugees. Our Berlin correspondent Nick Holsworth has been meeting some of them who've made new homes for themselves in Germany.
In the streets of Berlin's New Cologne Syrian quarter, euphoria is mixed with uncertainty. Yamin Mohan, like many in the diaspora, is closely following the news from Syria, but also Germany's political discourse. The restaurant manager, who employs 50 people, is upset over calls for Syrian refugees to be sent back.
These are all hard-working people, and now we're already talking about deportations to Syria? What's going to happen to our businesses? It's not fair.
Less than 24 hours after Bashar al-Assad fled Syria, Germany has put more than 47,000 asylum applications on hold. Fueled by the far right, the debate over their right to stay is raging. The Christian Democrat Party, favourites in February's elections, is proposing a leaving bonus of €1,000. Rim al-Najjar, who has rebuilt her life in Germany, is not directly under threat. Like 160,000 other refugees since the start of Syria's civil war, she has obtained a German passport, but she criticises the political exploitation of her citizenship.
Honestly, I'm afraid that we're still playing politics on the backs of the Syrians when the country isn't out of the woods yet. I think it's too early to return safely to Syria. 53 years of injustice is bound to create chaos and reprisals.
The outgoing government of Chancellor Scholz is warning against swift changes to policies on Syrian asylum. Tarek Al-Aus, himself a refugee and member of a migrant defence organisation, would prefer Germany to focus first on reconstruction aid for Syria.
Instead of asking Syrians how they might promote social justice in Syria, Germany preferred to quickly discuss repatriation. They don't realise the fear this creates among Syrians, especially for those with families in Germany.
But the country is in the middle of an election campaign. The million Syrians who have found a second home in Germany could pay the price.
Ciarán Donnelly is Senior Vice President of International Programmes at the International Rescue Committee. He's standing by for us now in New York. Ciarán, thank you so much for being with us on the programme this evening. The IRC, it's describing this as a watershed moment for Syria, but you point out that there are still more than 16 million people in the country who are in need of humanitarian assistance. And that is before we even start talking about the millions who may return to their homeland in the coming weeks and months. Just talk to us about what life is like for those people in need of aid in Syria.
Yeah, the scenes that we've seen from your reporters, dramatic celebrations in the streets in Damascus and elsewhere around Syria, as well as heartrending images out of the prisons as people look for news of their family, underscore the seismic nature of the political transition that's happened. Politically, Syria is in a very, very different place this week than it was just a few days ago. But the underlying conditions for people in Syria haven't changed as a result of this political transition. It's a country that is dealing with the consequences of almost 14 years of civil conflict. It's a country with 23 million people. 60% of those have been displaced either internally or externally. About half of the population lives below the poverty line, half the population is food insecure, meaning they don't know where their next meal is coming from, but 90% live below the poverty line. And the GDP of the country has halved over the last 10 or so years. The health system has been destroyed and is essentially non-functional. Public services deteriorated across the country. So it's a country that has massive humanitarian and development challenges, and those are kind of impacting directly on the lives of Syrians across the country today, even as they celebrate what is for many of them this moment of real hope.
And Ciarán, you point out as well that fighting, it's affecting the ability of some of your teams on the ground to access certain populations in need. What is the situation there and how can you get to those people?
It's been a very dynamic few weeks for people across Syria and for our teams and other organizations responding to their needs. As the rebel offensive moved towards Damascus, we were forced to suspend some programs in Idlib and in northwest Syria. Some programs like our emergency health programming and support to health facilities were able to keep going. We have about 870 staff working across Syria today, as well as a large number of Syrian civil society organizations we support. They were able to keep working for the most part. Some of them were displaced for themselves. Those teams are quickly getting back to work as fighting in those areas has subsided. But we're also seeing clashes elsewhere in some of the lines of control between different militia groups in the northeast of Syria. So it's a very dynamic and quickly changing situation where we're forced to pause. We try to keep that pause to a limit for just a few days and then get the teams back to work as quickly as we can.
And Ciarán, what kind of responsibilities does the international community have here?
I think we have to recognize that this is a moment of real opportunity for Syria, but also a moment of real danger for Syrians. Everything we're seeing, the celebrations that we're seeing from people speak to that moment of opportunity, but there are a lot of conditions needed to bring about a peaceful and stable transition over the coming days. So from the international community, I think first and foremost, we need crowding in of support for Syrian people, for Syrian communities. That starts with political and diplomatic support to do everything possible to bring about a stable transition of power, the rapid establishment of necessary civil administration, public services, reinforcing those services that are already there. We also need financial support. Funding to Syria from a humanitarian perspective has declined in recent years. Now is the moment for the the international community, both regionally and globally, to make good on their commitments to the Syrian people and come forward with pledges of support for immediate relief, but also for long-term reconstruction. And lastly, we need an understanding of the situation that while many Syrians are choosing to return, many others are not yet ready to make that decision. And for those who are in exile in foreign countries, we need patience and support to continue for their situation.
Ciarán, we'll have to leave it there for now, but we do really appreciate your time on the programme. That's Ciarán Donnelly, Senior Vice President of International Programmes at the International Rescue Committee. Well, it is time now for All the Day's